Hello and welcome. I'm Dario Betti. I'm the CEO of MEF. In case you have just joined us, welcome to the MEF Connects Digital Transformation. We have put together an incredible list of speakers today to see the latest on identity. And so far, it was a lot of identity discussions in terms of project, and we've just heard from the DCMS in UK, but previously different government, different private operators, in consumer studies, as well as a primer from Andrew about a lot of topics. What we haven't talked a lot about is personal data as the economic driver of a lot of a digital economy, which is a great topic for MEF, has been for a while, and thanks to Julian Ranger as well, the founder and executive chairman of DGME, as well as former board member of MEF as well, I should say. So welcome, Julian. Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you, and pleasure to be here today. Looking forward to the session just coming up.
Perfect. So, Julian, I'm now going to leave you the floor because today's sessions, the personal data in the digital economy, promises a lot of things to our listeners and viewers out there. And starting with what can we do with it? What can we do with its richness? Julian, tell us more.
Okay. Well, nice to see everybody. I'm assuming that you can see the display because I'm on a different thing. So I'm going to be talking today about personal data in the digital economy and what that means in terms of, as I would say, increasing the amount of data that we're going to share. People often think about personal data and say, well, we need to share it for various reasons, and I'll come back to that. But very often in the last few years, the conversation is how we decrease or we throttle down on the sharing that we're doing. But in fact, we need to increase the velocity of rich personal data sharing. And velocity is a really important word because velocity of money equates to GDP in the economy or value in the economy. And so if we can increase the velocity of rich personal data sharing, there should be more value in it for everyone, the individual, the businesses, governments, society as a whole. But clearly, we can only do that if we have full privacy, security, and consent. But I want to be under no illusions. The purpose of this conversation is how do we increase that sharing, not decrease it to get rid of the false tracking and everything else. That needs to happen. But we need to find a way of increasing the sharing with full privacy, security, and consent. Now, today we've been talking about digital identity. And it's quite interesting because when we think about digital identity, we're so often talking about passport, birth certificate, and other similar identification data. But I would like to propose that identity really is, yes, it's our identification data, who we are, and can include verified credentials in terms of training records, who we work for, and other stuff. But it also incorporates all of our personal data, our activity, all of our medical data, all of our bank transactions, all of our social interactions. These are all your activity and a part of your wider identity. And when we're sharing data with businesses, we might share just personal data. So I might share some transactions or some medical data for a medical app. Or I could just share some identification data, or I could share the combined two. But what I'm going to concentrate on today is personal data and what we do there. And I will also not cover the fact that personal data can be used for identification as well. So we're going to really look at just the personal data aspect. We can cover any wider aspects in the Q&A that follows. So what the premise of this is about is that we need to share more and better data. And we need it for all of these things that we can see here. So if you just take personalized health as an example, just one out of this myriad of set, is we want to move to personalized medicine that is specific about you or me. To do that, we've got to share all of our health data since we were born, advanced wearables, genomics, the food we buy and eat, and even social data, which is a good indicator of mental state. And we just can't do that together. We cannot bring that data together today. Businesses can't, health services can't, we can't. And therefore, the future of personalized health is prejudiced. So if we're going to do that, we need to do more and better data. But what do we mean by better data? And this is where I'm going to just do a little bit of technical. Most of it isn't. We should define it just to see the scope of the problem that we've got to try and do. And we define it as rich data with 5 key characteristics. Ideally, we want a single source of truth. So we don't have to say, is it Julian, is it Julian, is it Julian? And the problems that come from trying to correlate or rather miscorrelate. Secondly, as I've just explained for health, we need a wide variety, multi-dimensional set of data, but that applies in nearly everything we do. Banks don't just need financial data if they're to sell us the right products to the right person at the right time. They need other information about us as well. We need it to be deep in time, or longitudinal being the smart word. That can be 1 or 2, 3 months, a year, or lifetime. It seems obvious we want our data to be accurate, but actually so much data that is shared is secondhand or inferred, and we really want it from source and validated as such. And then the final one, I'm going to take you back to increasing the velocity of personal data sharing. If we're going to increase the velocity, we have to make data easy to use, and it isn't easy to use. It comes in a multitude of different formats and everything, and when we're using data, we have to know far too much about the sources, and that causes all sorts of problems trying to do it. So ideally, we want all of our data to be normalized. Now, that's a real challenge. Nobody can bring that data together easily. And we've got the challenge that our personal data use is being constrained because of the business concerns. Now, the MEF does a wonderful trust study every year, and recent one has been published, which I'm sure many of you have seen, but you can get from the MEF website. And it shows that individuals don't trust. So we have to bring trust into the system. We have to share with privacy, security, and consent, and we have to have rich data. Otherwise, the future isn't going to happen. But the problem is, and it's probably not a problem, I mean, I think we're all quite happy that no company can know everything about you. But even if we ignored privacy, security, and consent, no company can actually aggregate all the data about you to get to that rich data which we need for the future. So some people say, well, what about Facebook and Google and Axiom? Well, if you take the full circle of view, they only have a wedge. It could be a bigger wedge than a lot of other companies, but it's only a wedge. They don't have my bank transactions, my health data, my wearables, my purchases, even some of my media. So we're in a position where, how do we move forwards? Well, there has to be a solution, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And this solution is now happening, and it's a move. It's a change in the world and a change to what we'll see as human centricity, because there is one entity in the whole system that does know all about you and me, and that's ourselves. Only you know all of your data sources, what hospitals and doctors you use, what banks you use, what social networks you use, where you buy stuff. Only you have rights of access to a full copy of that data, but you do have those rights. You've had them for years. They're now digital, data portability, etc. And only you have unlimited usage rights. So I can take my medical data, print it off, put it on the windows of my car and drive around. If anyone else was to do that, that would be a gross breach of my privacy and they'd go to prison. But I can do what I like with my medical data. So therefore, it comes to the simple conclusion that if you're going to aggregate rich data about an individual, it can only occur at the individual. And that is the key to the next evolution of the personal internet, of sharing personal data. Now, how is that done? How can it be done? Well, it's done by what's called data facilitators, and that's the term being used in the new EU Data Governance Act. It's coming out next year. It can be my data operators. If you want to know more, there's various companies around. I would urge you to look at My Data, which is a global body, a bit like MEF. but for this particular area. DigiMe, my company, we are one of those data facilitators. So when I use DigiMe today as an example, it is an example. I'd like to think it's a very good example, but as they say on the BBC when they're talking, other brands are available. The good news is that when you aggregate data at the individual, and then the individual can choose to share it, privacy, security, and consent comes with it. Say comes for free, you do have to make sure it's architected properly to get that security. But companies like us, we are, for example, have been audited by governments for health data and lots of other things as well. So how does it work? Well, we're very familiar with an email program on our phone. And in that email program, you download it to your phone, you connect your 2, 3, 4 email accounts, you authenticate those, username and password, maybe 2-factor ID in the best cases, and then your emails come down to you and you can see, search and share them. It's a miracle. Well, it's the same with the data facilitator. You download DigiMe to your device, you connect to your bank accounts, your health services, your wearables, etc. You authenticate, and then DigiMe in this example, because we're using DigiMe as an example, will bring all of your data down to you directly. You choose where to store it. Now, it could be a default drive, or you can choose your own drive, Dropbox, Google Drive, others. It doesn't matter because your DigiMe encrypts all of your data with a key held only by you. So you are the only person that can access that data. And it happens in our business, we fully normalize all the data as well as it goes through, which is significant, but it comes in. So all of the data comes to the individual stores it. And it's done with edge processing so that the company, your data facilitator in this case, does not see, touch, or hold your data. So you have 100% private, fully secure, and it is a rich data library. It's single source, wide, deep, accurate, and normalized. So, of course, lots of companies in governments, researchers, others would like access to the data. So they can with consent. So we have a full consent stack arbitrated by a consent certificate, as you can see here. And a company just registers for a consent certificate, which meets the bar in GDPR and other privacy legislation around the world for explicit and informed consent. Exactly what do they want to use it for? And they push that consent certificate into an API. It opens on the individual's device. And if they're happy with the value proposition, they can say yes. Their DigiMe extracts a copy of the data and passes it to the Apple service. And that can be done actually without even the individual having to download DigiMe in the first place. So it's very easy for people to be onboarded and used. But the key here is not getting the data for some third party, not trying to do stuff in the background, but go to the individual and ask them. Why? It's trustworthy, it's private, it's secure, it's consented, all the things it should be. But the data is better, it's richer. It's got all those characteristics of single source, wide, deep, accurate, and normalized. So it is better for everybody. And it's done in such a way that the only person that can see the whole of the individual is the individual, and the business just gets what is defined in their consent certificate. So you can see here on the right-hand side. And these are a little bit more details. There's a standard set of icons so people know what data has been shared, whether it's one-off or more, whether it's staying on device or is leaving, is being shared with third parties, and they can dive down and even see the data they're going to share before they share it. So a real high watermark for consent. And afterwards, they have a dashboard so they can see all the shares they've done, all the times it's gone, and if it's a regular share, they can control the sharing, etc. So the whole point is the individual is at the center, and it's made very simple and easy for them. So we will now try the marvels of modern technology by showing this live. This all exists. As I said, there are various companies that do it. So here you can see someone setting up their DigiMe first. You don't have to do that before sharing data, but it's just to sort of show you the full experience. So they're connecting to choose to put it into their Dropbox, which is where they're going to store their data, provide the accreditations, and then they've connected, and they'll choose to put some channels into that, and that will happen. This is all real time, so you're sort of seeing it go from there. And they can choose a whole variety of different sources of data. In this case, they're going to choose Twitter and provide their authentication, and then all of the data will come down into their DigiMe. So this was two-factor ID. As I said, this is all live and real, so you're seeing exactly as it happens. So sometimes we should. So the data comes down, and the individual will now every day have a full update of all of their Twitter posts, but it could be medical, fitness, banks, etc., that they want to share. And that's the information there. Now they then go and use an app. In this case, it's an amusing app called TFP, which will go through all of their social data and show them anything which they may have used inappropriate words. So this is the consent certificate that they go through, and if they're happy to share it, they swipe to share. It's as simple as that, and the app will now receive the data, in this case the social data, ongoing access, but it will stay on device. The data is encrypted and then passed through to the app that is going to receive all of those posts. So you'll see the posts coming in. I will move on at this point because it's just to show you that that's what happens, and you can see this chap has used Satan once, which apparently may not be a good thing. So what does this allow? If businesses go directly to the individual, any business, it can be a small business or the largest business or governments, they can get far better data than they would otherwise get from data brokers, and it's all permissioned. There are huge benefits in cost and effort savings. You just use one API, many different sources, it's quick. Because of the quality of the data, it's far simpler analytics. And there's reduced data compliance effort. And of course, you get trust. So why now? Is this actually real, or is this just a dream? Is it things? Well, we know it's not a dream. I've showed you the example. But there is government legislation. Getting data around the back of me without my trust is being squeezed down, as it should be. And we all know that we need a trust relationship with individuals, patients, citizens. And the capability is now coming. But is it true? Is it safe? Is it there? Well, in the UK, they were looking at the effect, and there was a report done by a company, Control Shift, said that this modification would actually bring at least 27.8. I love the accuracy of these estimates that you get, economic estimates per year. In fact, an estimate across the whole of the EU is approximately 1 trillion euros if we can free up and share personal data in this way. So we then did a big data mobility infrastructure checkout, lots of companies receiving, sharing, and using the data to see. You can see the companies here, a wide variety. And the conclusions were that it can be made safe, that we do get valuable services. The breadth of data is critical to that value. But it proved that it's here today. And we know from work being done around the world, and here this is particular to the health environment, that it is game-changing in these areas. So in health, the whole future of health is actually dependent upon the individual having their data. And in fact, the EU, since this was done, has set a target of every single citizen in the EU having all their health data by 2030. And that's already happening, and we can already see that. For example, in Holland, the MedMay program is already live to give people their health data. We've done the same in the UK and Iceland. The US are doing the same with Meaningful Use 3, because it fundamentally changes the ability of the health system to do what it needs. Instead of your health data being all over the shop, you can't bring it together. We regularly have issues today, even in advanced countries, of incomplete medical records when we go into the healthcare system, and the dangers that means, the lack of ability to diagnose. We can't use health service or consumer acts because they can't easily get access to the data. We can't do full research because getting that longitudinal data isn't there. But it fundamentally changes when the individual can act as the collection point and then decide to share that data. There's a study that was done, Shopping Tomorrow, with ourselves, MasterCard and CX Loyalty, showing exactly how this can change the retail. So it means that any brand, don't have to be the largest brands in the world, the Amazons of this world, can now do timely offers or other value exchanges. And MasterCard themselves have seen many things that can change as a result of the quality, the ease, the ability of getting data from the individual, whatever that may be. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart. There's too many, but it's what is absolutely clear is that when you go to the individual, the availability of data is no longer the issue. You can solve a very wide variety of use cases. The key for a business, or indeed a government or health, is what's the use case? Why would the individual want to share the data for you? And as we say, that's for value exchange. So it's a service, a convenience, or a reward. It's not just about money. For example, if there's a diabetes app and it wants my health data, my wearables, and my medications, I'm going to say yes to that because it's going to keep me alive. The value proposition is keeping me alive. I'll probably pay for the app as well. In retail, it may be that you're asking for data to recommend things, saving me time. Maybe for me, saving time's enough. Maybe for someone else, they want a discount or loyalty points or some other value proposition. And it's the businesses that decide the value propositions, present it to the individuals, and individuals can say yes or no. So the future is not constrained by getting access to the data. Your future is constrained by what's your value proposition, and is that what will get an individual to say yes? And then you have access to this rich data, which you can do with. And it's simple, and I really want to emphasize the simplicity of this approach, which is here today. It's only in its earlier stages, but it is growing and happening. Is today getting personal data is complex. Where do you source it? How do you know that it was consented? How do you know that it meets the regulations, that it is accurate? And because a lot of it's inferred, it's not rich, you need really complex algorithms quite often, moving up into AI, to extract useful results upon which you can do a value exchange, and quite expensive centralized processing. But in this new world, access to data is simple. It's a single API call if you have a value proposition. It's rich data, and therefore actually it's proven you can use much simpler algorithms to extract features which enable you to meet your value exchange. Privacy, security, and consent is embodied with it, and you can process at the edge as well. You can take it back into your systems, but do edge processing. So the world's decentralized personal data grid is the future. The individuals having their data. It's supported by legislation like GDPR with the data portability, etc. There are rules coming in to make sure that data intermediaries like DigiMe, fair pricing, etc., so that we don't end up in another bad world. But it basically fixes the current architecture. If you're a small business, you don't have access to first-party data, it's very difficult today, but not now. You can go straight to the individual, and it's inordinately simple. You can be up and running in hours or days. The key is, what's your value proposition? So the future I pointed out right at the beginning, with all of those future capabilities of personalized medicine, improved financial services, hyper-personalization experiences in retail, etc., can all now happen with much better data than ever before, available to all, giving value to all. So that's the background. I'm sure there's lots of questions, and I think Dario will now mysteriously appear to ask questions. Dario, over to you.
Mysteriously appearing here. Here we go. Hi Julian. We have already quite a few questions, and yet only 3 minutes. So I might ask you to fill in some of the other questions on the common chat. But I'll start with a very simple one, at least, from Teniola, that I think I'm looking now, was asking, so is DGME available to customers direct?
Yes.
Yeah, that was it. That was fast. So if you go and download it on the app.
.me or contact me, but yes, it is. Yes, it's available
now,
today.
I have a couple of questions. The first one I received in here directly from me, and it was saying, explicit and informed consent, is that not a holy grail? How can you do that? In one of your slides, you were showing that you tell people what's happening with their data.
So it's subjective where you've reached a bar, but a lot of people have looked at this and everything else, and it's really about being clear and simple, right? If you're too complex, it won't happen. So we've got a combination of text and icons and the ability and to actually see the data you're going to share. So you should be very clear exactly what you're asking for the data, not just for processing. It's exactly what for. Who is going to see it? Is it leaving my device? Is it one-off? Are you carrying on? And then the individual must have the capability to control that, to stop the sharing in a simple dashboard. If they're in Europe, of course, they've got right to forget. So it's a combination. What we've put in our certificate, we've worked with people worldwide, and in fact, another group called Kantara have got a consent working group that have tried to do best practice. But it will continue to evolve, right? So no one would say that our consent certificate is the final word on it, but it is seen as up there with best practice to be clear and moving it forwards.
So great. So you have an options to go there and check it for yourself on the DGME app. But the last questions, and we're already done at the time, so I'll have to ask you if you can follow up officially in our chat. It was a very interesting one that said, how can you deliver a successful personal data solution at scale, serving people both rapidly and accurately? It was I think your question about accuracy and velocity can both exist at the same times. And the question is it possible? But
it is, because it's being done today, but it's possible because each individual is their own processing node. So you don't need to do what we've done, which is vast centralization, which delays things. So if you can make each individual the node, which we've done, then actually it becomes much, much easier. And that's the point. It's a simple piece because it's directly at each individual.
Well, here we go. I think we're already over, just slightly, ever so slightly over our time. So I think I'll have to say thank you to Julian. Great presentation. It will be available afterwards as well. And if Julian can continue some of the chat out there in the comments.
I will
Thank you very much.
No problems at all. That's very kind of you.